cogs. Look, above you. There in the rafters. An interloper.
In an instant, everything changes. From her hidden position near the exit, Mara gazes up in horror, locking eyes with her sister, who gazes back. Then down at the swarm of machine cultists amassing below. From somewhere, an alarm howls into life.
Take her down, my brothers,
cries the cultist leader.
Blast the fleshy unbeliever from existence. Suffer not the flesh to live.
The cultists, armed with strange weapons held in both hands and connected to heavy shoulder packs, open fire. Crackling bolts of arcanic energy lance up towards the rafters, detonating on impact. Lynn sprints along the narrow rafter in a feat of near superhuman agility, narrowly keeping ahead of the explosions, but it can only be a matter of time before her luck runs out. Mara, with a strangled cry, starts to run to her sister's aid, but Tatters grabs her, doing her best to hold the woman back. Mara, no! There's too many of them! There's nothing you can do! Mara, oblivious, tries to tear herself free. Get off me! Lynn, I'm coming! Several of the cultists turn at the sound and train their deadly weapons on Mara and Tatters.
More of the heretics, my brothers! Eliminate them!
Above them, Lynn has come to a stop, taking what shelter she can from the barrage of fire behind a solitary iron strut. She reaches into her backpack and pulls out a small, heavy keg, perhaps a foot in length. With her free hand, she lights a touch paper, then meets Mara's gaze once more. With a lopsided grin, she blows her sister a kiss. The force of the explosion is sufficient to knock the cultists, perhaps 40 feet below, flying. It shatters rafters, struts, and roof. With a tortured groan, the entire roof gives way, thousands of pounds of twisted metal thundering down on the cultists below. And Mara, still twisted in Tatter's arms, begins to scream. Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master, and your guide as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Chasing Adventure rule set, as well as a variety of other systems, tools, and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning. The following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. Adventure continues. Last time on The Lone Adventurer, the team infiltrating Hammerhold survived being transported to a doomspire filled with toxic clouds of the void. Whatever magic had transported them there thankfully returned them, and Tatters realized that the Ring of Winter was orchestrating the reactivation of the Doomspires with the intention of bringing the whole of the chained world to ruin. The party discovered an arcane lock, which they speculated was protecting some deadly weapon or experiment gone awry. The lock appeared to be in imminent danger of failing. Closing in on their target, the party found their way blocked by machine cultists and were forced to split up in order to bypass them. I genuinely did not see that coming. Last session, things were set up for a tricky time when I made an endeavour move with Lynn. That move states, when your follower does a dangerous task alone, they do it to the best of their ability. But they are taken out of the action. They're trapped, injured, distracted, etc. The GM will say how. Mythic had informed me that she'd been spotted by machine cultists, and so I began this scene at Chaos Factor 7 with a plan for the scene. It was decision time. Either go back for Lynn, or press on and get separated. And then came the fatal scene test. Were things going to play out as intended? No, said Mythic. This scene is going to be interrupted with an NPC action, the meaning of which involves the keywords ruin building. That sounded like perhaps an explosion or a collapse of the building, and that would force a separation in the party. It seemed likely that the cultists, with their stockpile of weapons, were going to be behind this, but again, Mythic had other ideas. It wasn't the cultists. Lynn was the next most obvious cause, and so I asked whether she was responsible, and Mythic said, exceptional, yes. I had a choice here. I probably could have come up with something considerably less terminal, and that was my inclination after my immediate gut interpretation of those prompts sank in emotionally. I really liked Lynn. I didn't want to lose her. And she was about to die just based on a bunch of Mythic results, without even the protection of a dice roll to defy danger. How could that be fair? But the more I thought about it, the more I was forced to conclude that my gut had the right of it, and my heart had got it wrong. Lynn, as a follower, was an NPC. She was far more the GM's creature than mine, the player. If Mythic said that the price of passing this obstacle was the sacrifice of an NPC, then that was just the way of it. And, honestly, the fact that the sacrifice was one I, as a player, didn't want to make, just made it all the more meaningful. If that's the mechanical and meta perspective on what just happened, there's another aspect to consider. What does all this mean in the fiction? Both Mara and Lynn, when I created them as followers using the chasing adventure rules, had a single want, and that want was the same for both of them: to protect the other. What is this loss going to mean for Mara, and, by extension, for the mission? Let's find out. They walk in silence, between gigantic, hammering pistons that blast periodic plumes of steam into the heat of the factory. Tatters feels as though she should say something, anything. She wants to share her sympathy, her shared sense of loss, but she doesn't know where to start or what she might say that wouldn't just make things worse. The shock is profound, and it must be infinitely worse for her companion. Mara, for her part, has said nothing. After that initial, raw, visceral reaction to her sister's death, she seems to have frozen over, or perhaps frozen from the inside out, no expression or sign of feeling evident. When the dam finally breaks, the words come spilling out like a flood, and it seems there is no end to them. Tatters has enough sense to just keep quiet and listen. We came up together on the streets after our mother died. As the oldest, it was my job to look out for us, to keep us safe from, well, there were a lot of things for two young girls to stay safe from on the streets of Lisgara. And so we learned fast. We got good at what we did, and that brought us to the attention of the Silver Nails. The Nails gave us protection and training, and in return we did the jobs that no one else could do. We became infiltrators, spies, assassins. In time we caught the attention of General Sereth Pinto, the big boss, and he offered us a position as his bodyguards. No more back alley work, no more wondering if we'd live to see the next morning. We argued about it, of course. Lynn enjoyed the danger and the freedom. She'd really never wanted to join the Nails in the first place. She thought Pinto was a creep. which he was. But it was my job to keep her safe, and I did what I thought was right. It came with a price, of course. Pinto had a doom-singer oath-bind us to him. We couldn't harm Pinto or allow harm to come to him. It seemed like a fair deal, and so, at my insistence, Lynn agreed to take it with me. What we didn't know was that, as a result of the oath bond, we would become obligated to follow his orders. Instead of his bodyguards, we effectively became his slaves. Thankfully, his appetites didn't extend to women, but in all other things, we were effectively his property. There was something else the Doomsinger added to the oath binding, something I suspect even Pinto wasn't aware of. When a general died, the oath bond would pass to his killer, and so we became bound to Tortimus. That is, until we travelled to that Doomspire place. Whether it was the distance we travelled, or some magic inherent in that place, or maybe even the effects of this ritual that's joining this place with others, the oath bond broke. We both felt it instantly. For the first time in years, perhaps the first time in our lives, we were free. Mara turns to face Tatters, and there are tears in her eyes. You know, as I look back on all of it, I think I finally understand. All those decisions I made to try and keep her safe, all they did was drag her deeper and deeper into danger. She didn't have to follow where I was leading. I think she knew damn well it was nowhere good, but she did it anyway. All this time, right up to the very end, I wasn't protecting her. She was protecting me. I wondered what effect the loss of her sister would have on Mara, and so I turned to my Oceanic NPC behavior tool, built in perchance, and I asked. The response was quite surprising, but also perfectly fitting. I rolled 0 matches, and no less than 4 6s. Here's what my Oceanic user guide says about that unlikely outcome. Those instances where there is no match indicate that something else is at play, some external preoccupation that the NPC brings up that is not intrinsically linked to their personality or disposition. In these cases, count up the number of 6s rolled and determine the degree of complication, twist, or difficulty this represents for the PC, and then ask a complex question of the Oracle to get a sense of the nature of it. 0 6s represent something trivial, perhaps some inconsequential small talk. At the other end of the spectrum, 7 6s means this NPC has something genuinely monumental, even life-changing to say, at least in terms of the impact to the PC. The Oracle gave me the following keywords: emotional and young. And from there, I knew Mara's backstory and her relationship with her sister was all going to come flooding out. I didn't have that backstory pre-written, and so I just wrote what felt right. That Oracle result also meant that we were going to discover the secret that she and Lynn had been keeping since last episode, about how they were now free from their oath bond. The idea of an oath bond, and the fact that they were both now free of it, had come about from a scene interrupt in the last episode. That interrupt was NPC positive, and the keywords were imprison work. I checked that this was related to the sisters and got an exceptional yes. Clearly, they had been enslaved somehow, and now they were free. I worked the logic of that back, and that gave me the Oathbond story. Unsurprisingly, Tortimus is a bastard, as was Pinto before him. An interesting emergent property of that tale was the introduction of a Doomsinger into the proceedings. in the spirit of linking threads, and because the oath-binding ritual made me think of our resident doomsinger, Heart of Snow, I decided to add that detail in for extra colour. But then I got to thinking. Could the doomsinger who wrought that ritual in fact be Heart of Snow? Could he be playing his own long game here? Why did he decide, of his own accord, to extend the binding to the slayer of General Pinto? Could he perhaps have foreseen these events, or somehow nudged fate's elbow in order to ensure they transpired? Or is it all just coincidence? Only time will tell, I suppose. Anyway, now we have a lot more information about Mara, but my sense is that we haven't fully mined all the potential from this scene. So let's keep digging and see what we unearth. I'm so sorry, Mara. I know what it means to lose someone close. From her place of cool, almost detached composure, Mara's temper suddenly flares. She rounds on the young Arcanist. What could you possibly know of Lost Girl? What are you, 15? 16? You're barely more than a child. You know nothing about my pain. Tatters bristles, doing her best to keep a grip on her own temper. She fails. Well, seeing as we seem to be in the mood for sharing, no, I'm not 16. In my time, I've lost more than my share. A damn sight more than you, I'll wager. Both parents when I was young, for starters. My brother when I was 12. More friends than I can count. A husband, 2 daughters, one little more than a baby, the other who died giving birth to my granddaughter. I swore to my little girl as she bled out in front of me that I'd keep her daughter safe. And then, in the last week, the web died. I lost every last friend I had left in the world. And that's not the worst of it. When the spider died, I lost the granddaughter I swore to my dying child that I would keep safe. So yes, I think I've got a pretty good handle on pain, all things considered. Mara stares at her, dumbfounded. What are you talking about? How old are you? Tatters does some swift mental arithmetic. In this body? About 4. Altogether, though, come next month, I'll be 82 years old. Mara is struggling to keep up. In this body? What do you mean? Tatters sighs, and there is shame and regret in her voice when she speaks. My mind was strong, as strong as it had ever been. I'd spent years studying the craft, learning all I could about the fabric and demons, but my body was failing. I was dying. I told myself I made a promise to my daughter that my granddaughter still needed me. I told myself I had to sacrifice myself for her, and so I entered into a pact with a demon. And this, she indicates herself, is the result. She sighs again, more deeply this time. But as I look back on all of it, I ask myself, how much was sacrifice? And how much was an unwillingness to accept my own mortality? Did I do what I did out of altruism or out of fear? And the more I look, the less I like the answer. Mara stares at her silently for perhaps 30 seconds. Then, at last, she seems to reach a decision. Sounds like we've got a lot more in common than I'd imagined. Apart from the whole, demon pact and different body thing. That's just creepy. Is that your body, made younger? Or did you steal... You know what? Don't answer that. I don't want to know. What matters right now is that there is this crazy bastard with an even crazier magic ring who seems determined to bring the world to an end. So I say we focus on that and deal with all the other shit later. What do you say? Tatters sags, all the anger drained from her, and with it, all the confidence. She feels crushed beneath a terrible weight. Do we even have a chance? Even if we make it that far, how can we realistically hope to take out the voice of the machine? I watched him and his lackeys take out an entire squad of vampires the night of that opera battle. How can the two of us possibly hope to survive in the face of power like that? Mara grins, though there is nothing of Lynn's carefree cheerfulness in it. Quite the opposite, in fact. Who said anything about surviving? The way I see it, we have a job to do, and neither of us have got anything left to lose. She reaches into her pack and pulls free a small keg identical to Lynn's. Infernal powder. So, what do you say, Tatters? Have you got one last sacrifice left in you? There were no further mechanics at play in that last scene, just Tatters responding to Mara's honesty with some of her own. And I'm very glad we had the opportunity to explore that secret of hers, because that is one I've been carrying as a player for a very long time. I had an inkling that she was significantly older than she seemed from the very first time she appeared in the story, way back in Series 1. But exactly who she was, and how she was related to the web and the spider in particular, that was all born of a curious accident. At a certain point in Series 2, I was looking over the character sheets of my party when I noticed I'd made a mistake. For the civilian names of both Tatters and the spider, I'd written the same surname, Kamidev. Obviously, that name had got stuck in my head, and I'd given it to both of them without realizing it. I was about to rub out and change the spider's civilian name when I stopped, and I thought for a moment. Was this really a mistake? Or was my subconscious trying to tell me something? And from that starting point, the pieces fell into place. With regard to the relationship between Tatters and Mara, I think something significant has happened here over the course of these few scenes. A line has been crossed with Mara's liberation from Tortimus, the death of her sister, and what appears to be a newly formed suicide pact between her and Tatters. A powerful bond has been forged between them, albeit one born of shared pain and trauma. Chasing Adventure has a mechanism to describe this, called favour. Favour represents feelings of gratitude, honour, responsibility or debt between a PC and another character, either a PC or an NPC. A character who favours another will feel inclined to act in their interest, even if just to pay off a perceived debt. When you favour someone, or someone favours you, you note down their name and the details behind the favour. Two people can mutually favour each other, and you can favour as many people as you like. While someone favours you, they might treat you especially kindly, might make you feel appreciated, act in your stead, or something similar. I think what we have here is the establishment of mutual favour between Tatters and Mara, which in turn unlocks access to a series of favour moves. But I think the change here is more significant even than that. I think what's happened here is that Mara has just made the switch from NPC to PC. That means a few things. Firstly, this represents a significant power boost for the party. A follower, while useful, is nowhere near as powerful or versatile as a PC. Second, I have myself a second narrative point of view, should I care to use it. As a PC, I can jump inside Mara's head, and I can see what makes her tick. And thirdly, with this dramatic shift in the relationship, I think I've established the narrative justification to take the settle-in move, as my party takes stock and make their plans, which will in turn bring Tatters back from the very brink and allow her to level up. Let's take a quick peek at what that looks like for our characters, and then see what it looks like mechanically. Mentally, physically, and emotionally on the verge of collapse, pair are forced to rest. They are able to find and hide within a deserted observation booth, which overlooks what they assume to be a weapons testing chamber. In addition to being somewhat secluded, it has the added benefit of being defensible. Tatters slumps into a seat, staring at the ground. She is, after a lengthy pause, the first to speak. When she does so, her voice is monotone and emotionless. You're suggesting a suicide pact to cut the head from the machine cult. When we get close to the voice, we blow ourselves up in order to take him and the ring out. Is that it? Mara nods. The rigid self-control is back, the mask back in place, and when she speaks, there is no doubting her resilience. Whatever grief and pain she is feeling has been buried, channeled, and only cold purpose remains. The way I see it, that's our best shot. He's likely to be at the middle of a small army, and from the sound of it, that ring makes him a pretty heavy hitter all on his own. So I say, we get him in sight, I light the fuse, and you transport us in close. Before he has a chance to react, the three of us go up in a fireball. Threat neutralized. What do you say? It is a long time before Tatters responds. When she eventually does, she raises her eyes to meet Mara's, and she holds her gaze unflinchingly. If we have to die, we have to die. I think we both agree on that. Honestly, maybe it's what I deserve. Maybe it's what you want. But I'm not going to die if I don't have to. And neither should you. I've fought hard enough to live to not just throw my life away. I don't think Lynn would have wanted you to throw away yours either. I think I have an idea of how we might not need to. You might not like it, but here's what I have. The next several hours are spent, first in argument, then in collaboration, and finally in silent recuperation. When at last the pair rise, it is with renewed clarity of purpose, and with a powerful certainty. Come hell or high water, they will track their quarry down, together, and eliminate them, or die in the attempt. And they will do so as a team. They have lost a great deal, these two beleaguered warriors. But the losses they have endured have only served to forge their resolve into something unbreakable, an intention that brooks no possibility of resistance. They will overcome. Of that, they are certain. And damn, whatever the cost. So, it's time for our team to take a break, and that means it's time for them to take the settle-in move. Here's what that move says. When you spend time resting as a group, whether it's taking a short break, sleeping overnight, or relaxing for weeks, the GM advances the ominous forces. Then, if anyone has 5 or more XP, they level up. If you have enough XP, you can level up multiple times at once. When you're finished resting and resume adventuring, remove all your conditions and refresh your armor. Because I'm playing a solo game, because I want some uncertainty about how things are playing out, I decided to handle ominous forces a little differently from the way they're presented in the Chasing Adventure rulebook. For each of the 6 ominous forces I currently have in play, I've assigned a die type, representing how long I think they have left to run. A sort of randomized countdown clock. When rolled against, if a 1 is rolled, the die type reduces by 1, until on a 1 on a d4, the conclusion of that threat is reached. So, I rolled against each ominous threat, and I got a 1 on 2 of those rolls. The d8 for Satara's bid for freedom goes down to a d6. And elsewhere, beyond my PC's awareness, another significant progression took place. Doom is creeping ever closer. Then it was on to happier tidings, levelling up. And not a moment too soon, Tatters had a condition marked in 4 of her 5 stats. That was just 1 failure away from crumbling completely. If she didn't settle in now, she was toast. As I look back to tot up the amassed XP over the previous 8 episodes we've had with Tatters, I noticed that I'd forgotten to repeat the end of session move that I did at the tail end of episode 9. To rectify that, I'm going to bend the rules just a little here and combine my settle-in move with my end of session move. That means, when I add everything up, that I have amassed 15 XP for my Arcanist, enough for her to level up 3 times. She is going to go up from level 4 to level 7, and that jump is going to come with some pretty significant benefits. I'll get into the details of what those benefits are, along with Mara's character creation, the next time that we see them. But for now, suffice it to say that this rest is going to reinvigorate my team and provide them with additional tools and tactics that will hopefully serve them well in the battle to come. But for now, it is time to leave our newly formed team to their planning and bring this episode to a close. I hope you'll join me next time. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it or leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can follow me on Blue Sky at theloneadventurer.bsky.social. Email me at theloneadb@gmail.com or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all others at theloneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening. The Void Sea extends out to every horizon, an endless, unbroken carpet of impenetrable cloud. Unbroken? Not quite. There, in the distance, a tiny shape can just be made out, a minute black sliver silhouetted against the pale grey of the clouds. As we approach, the sense of scale begins to shift and resolve into something altogether more ominous. What had appeared tiny at a distance proves instead to be gargantuan, a looming tower of forbidding black iron, massive, silent, and cold as the grave. So it has stood for time immemorial, a lonely, dead sentinel of a bygone age. So it is assumed it will remain. When the arc of raw arcanicity erupts from one of the tower's sharply angled surfaces, it sends a flock of roosting birds scattering into panicked flight, their perch of ages rendered instantly strange and terrible. Another crackling burst is released, followed by another, and then a low, droning hum begins. The entire structure begins to vibrate in a slow, steady, remorseless heartbeat, and deep within the structure a cold, alien intelligence begins to stir from its slumber of aeons. The second Doomspire is slowly, but inexorably, waking up.